welcome. Come on in. Let's go check out Cinderella's Sweet Shop. Guys, welcome to Cinderella's Sweet Shop. Some of you may have known in the past we went by Cinderella's Sweatshop, but we are transitioning into Cinderella's Sweet Shop, and I'm going to tell you why. While I do still love to do little knickknacks and fun craft ideas and ways to stretch your dollar, I find that I do more cooking, and you guys tend to love that more than anything, so we've changed the name to Cinderella's Sweet Shop. And I have a little side gig that I sell cakes and baked goods out of my home, so it's easier for people that buy goods from me to understand that this is where all the goods come from. So follow me around today, and I'm going to show you how to stretch your dollar, entertain your family and friends for the holidays, and we're going to have some fun. So here's what's on the menu for today. Since we're getting into the holiday festive times, we're going to do appetizers and hors d'oeuvres. We're getting into New Year's, and the Super Bowl's not far behind that. So we're going to do some entertaining classics today. When I have friends and family over, I try to think of things that people enjoy the most, what they love, and what we simply order when we go into a restaurant. So here's what we're going to make today. We're going to do a chicken tender. We're going to do from scratch the chicken brought in from the grocery store with a little breading, a little soaking, a little marinating, and then we're going to fry that puppy up. We're also going to do some classics like an onion. We don't want to do an onion bloom because those are kind of hard to do and they're time consuming. So we're just going to chop up an onion in some wedges, put that in the fryer and cook that as well. We're also going to do some fried dill pickles, and we're going to do some fried cheese curds. Also on the menu is going to be a heated crab dip. We're going to heat that up in the oven and put that on a toasted baguette bread, and it is delicious, delicious. You're going to want to remember this recipe. And we're going to do a cheeseburger slider, and my favorite, a sangria cocktail. So let's get cooking. Anytime you go to a party, you're going to start things off with a zesty little cocktail. So today, we're going to have a holiday cocktail. We're going to take our big pitcher, or you can use like a big punch bowl or whatever you choose. I choose to use this because when it's over and your guests have gone home, if you don't use everything and they don't drink it all up, you can keep this in your refrigerator, and it's got a handy little dispenser, and we can just fill our glass when they go home or the next day. So you don't have to put, I'm using cranberries today. You don't have to put cranberries in it, but I do because I love the way that it tastes, and it's pretty. It's really pretty. So here's a little trick I'm going to show you with your cranberries. You don't want to put them in there whole. You can because it's pretty, but you will not really get the flavor of the cranberry if you put it in there whole. So here's my little trick that I do when I do cranberries or sliced cherry tomatoes or anything like that. I usually just put my hand on it, but I'll probably cut my hand, so I'm not going to do the hand today. I just put me some cherry tomatoes, or you can do grapes, or and today we're going to do the cranberries. Put your cutting board or a plate right on top of it. Make sure you put your hand really good on there, and you're just going to take your knife and slice it along this way, and it's going to cut everything in half for you. I just choose to do it the old-fashioned way, so I'm going to, and these little boogers can roll around a little bit. We're just going to simply slice it in half, and that's what the inside of a cranberry looks like. When you get them out of a can or frozen, sometimes they'll be more burgundy color. That's because they've been probably blanched or par cooked a little bit, and they will soak up the color. Anytime that I do like a cranberry relish or anything like that, to me it's just really, really pretty to see those colors come out. And you'll see that this will kindly stain my hands a little bit. Here in a little bit, you'll see that. Our family tradition for Christmas is we do Christmas morning. We cook a big breakfast and we have my in-laws over, and you know, the boys will come if they can. When you have a divorced family, people have so many places to go, and I do not want to be that mother that says you've got to come the day of. So I just tell them, we want you to come, but we also understand that, you know, you might be stretched thin to get from one place to the other. Come at some point. You're more than welcome to come to the meal, but come at some point and just spend some time with me. I don't want them to run in the door and stay for 30 minutes and have to run out to go somewhere else, because there's only so much time in the day. So, you know, we have a pretty good understanding with that. But our favorite at Christmas is, of course, we love the entertaining too, but our favorite on Christmas morning is getting in the kitchen and cooking together. My husband Todd will tell you, she don't let me cook. Well, he can cook, and he can cook pretty good, but I am a control freak, and I feel like I have to do it all. So I don't let him, but I'm working on that. He likes to cook the bacon and the ham and the sausage and that kind of stuff. So we've got in here about probably a half a cup of cranberries, and we've got them sliced in half. And I'm going to toss in probably about a half a cup of blueberries as well. And again, these two, you won't get that full flavor if you just put them in there whole. It's prettier to do that, but I just feel like that you want that extra flavor. And if you're going to go to all the trouble to put them in there, then by all means, take the time to cut them in half. And like the cranberries, as you'll see on my knife, you're going to get some of that extra color from that. And to me, the deeper the color, the more people, it's a visual thing, you know, the deeper the color in a sangria, you feel like it's got more flavor to it. And in case you're wondering, I've already washed these. I try to make myself do that when I bring them home from the grocery store. If I know I'm not going to use them immediately when I come home from the grocery store, I'm not going to rinse them. But I went to the store last night and I knew we were going to be doing this today, so I brought them in and gave them a quick wash, and then I just put them, rinsed out the container and put them back in there. Another trick that you might not know is you don't really want to wash your fruits or your vegetables really until you're going to use them, because when you wash them, that kind of helps, it makes them break down a little bit faster. So you don't really want to wash them unless you're going to be using them like in 24 to 48 hours. So again, we've got in here probably about, we're going to do about a half a cup on these blueberries. And it's, again, it's really just a visual. It does add some flavor, but it's just a visual for that. So we've got that done, and then we're going to take our orange. Again, I've washed that, and I don't really want to put this end in there because it's not pretty, so we're going to use that and squeeze some of that juice in there. Everything is going to be used, even if it's just squeezing the juice out of what you can get. We're just going to take our orange slices and throw them in there. And that's 2 oranges. And I like to get like a navel orange because they don't have as many seeds in there. Now, you will see that they do have some seeds, but not as many. And I'm going to switch this knife because I didn't sharpen it and it's dull and it's going to wear me out. I don't like a dull knife. Okay, so we're going to put those in there, and we're just going to simply zest that in there. Get all that out of there, because times are hard and groceries are expensive. We want to make the best of it. And 1 lemon. You can use anything you want to. You can put in raspberries, you can put in blackberries, anything. pineapples, if you want to put that in there. I'm not going to put pineapple in there because I'm going to show you another way how I'm frugal and cheap. So we've got our blueberries or lemons or orange and our cranberries. Here's where I'm cheap. We love these big old cans, glass jars of peaches. I get them at Sam's. We love them. They're delicious. They're a little bit on the expensive side, but I tend to eat them for my lunch. So if you look at it like that, it's not that bad expensive. And we love these pineapple spears that we get at Sam's. But there's always this juice left over. And I tell Todd, don't throw that juice away. That's a good thing to use to cook with, whether I put my shrimp in it and grill them or I use it for cocktails. So today we're going to use it for cocktails, and I'm just going to pour what juice is left in there. We're going to pour what juice is left from our peaches, because it's kind of like a little simple syrup, and it's going to give you that little bit of extra sweetener, and it's got all that flavor in there from your stuff. So we've got our juices in there, and I'm going to use just a little bit of apple cider because I really like that little extra kick it gives it. And that's going to be probably about a half a cup. We already do have some pineapple juice in there from our canned pineapples, but this is just going to give us a little extra body and some extra flavor. We're going to pour in a little bit of cranberry juice. On the pineapple juice, that was probably about a half a cup. We're going to do, for the color, probably about 3/4 of a cup of the cranberry juice. We're going to add a little bit of blueberry vodka, probably about half a cup. Just because we want to bring out the flavor of the blueberries. We're also going to use a little bit of a cranberry vodka, about a half a cup of that as well. You can add more or less depending on how strong you want it. And then this is, it's already a sangria. It's more like a wine, and I just get it at Sam's. And guys, it is so cheap. This big, huge bottle is less than 10 bucks. My friend Gina Donnelly, she brought me a bottle one time, and I was like, girl, that stuff is good. And she said, honey, it's cheap. Don't get excited. Well, when she told me where she got it and I found out how much it was, this is a good go-to gift for your friends at Christmas. I know I have a couple of friends that plays bunco, and this would be a good gift for you to give your girlfriends with bunco or just your girlfriends in general. And trust me, I've thought about leaving a bottle for my mail carrier because she brings me a lot of Amazon packages. I'm just going to put this entire bottle in there just like that. Is it bad if I want to give my mail carrier some alcohol? I don't know. I guess if I was my mail carrier, I'd probably like that. So we're just going to take a little spoon here and we're just going to stir it all up. Stir it up really, 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 really good. And then I always use my spoon just to see what it tastes like. It's so good. So our cocktail is mixed up and ready to go. We're going to put this in the refrigerator so it can stay good and cold. Everything has been cold. My alcohols, I generally keep those out, but I did pop them in the refrigerator so they'd be cold and ready to go. Okay, so our next appetizer is we're going to do our crab dip. And we want to do all these things to save us a little bit of time. The things that have to be cooked, always do it first, or the things that need to be soaking and marinating, you want to do those first as well. But this really, guys, today's stuff, it does not take that long to do. It's just planning ahead. Really, it's just planning ahead. So we're going to take one package, and you can use real crab if you want, but we're trying to entertain on a dime here, not a $100 bill. So we're going to use imitation crab. Once it's cooked, they're not going to be able to tell. It's got all those other good flavors in there, so they're not going to be able to tell. I mean, I guess they'll be able to tell, but it's all right. There's two ways you can go about doing your crab. You can take your hand and you just take a fork and shred it like this, or you can chop it. Now, I'm lazy. I just take my hands and I just shred it all up with my fingers because it's faster And again, we ain't got time for that. Now some of my pieces, I'll leave them full like this. And then some of them, I'll do about half and half. And I'll chop those others to make them smaller so all the pieces aren't so big. You can put anything in this really. Shrimp. A lot of times I like to do a smashed shrimp in here, but I went to the store yesterday and I really didn't like the way that the shrimp looked, and I'm a little picky when it comes to that, so I didn't want to spend the money for shrimp and then them be not good. You know, fresh seafood, sometimes if it's sat out a long time in the store, sometimes it just doesn't do good. It dries out, and so no, I didn't want to do that. But if I do the shrimp, I will kind of butterfly it, cut it in half, and then I will take like a butcher knife or a chopping knife, and I'll smash it down. Just lay the shrimp down and just smash it down with that knife blade, and then chop it up a little bit so that you're getting the flavor of the shrimp. And you can use, I've done this before too, is canned shrimp. They do make a canned shrimp, tiny canned shrimp. It's like where the tuna fish is. I know Walmart has them, Kroger has them, and they also have canned crab meat, but it's expensive, so I usually will just do these right here. And I will just run this little knife right through here and just kindly chop it up. I hear my dog barking. Y'all might can hear her too. We recently lost one of our dogs, our little Jace, our King Charles Cavalier Cocker Spaniel. That's a mouthful. He got sick suddenly on us, and we had to have him put to sleep a couple of weeks ago. So our little dog Marley, she's missing him. That's my driveway bell ringing. It's the FedEx guy bringing packages. I do my Christmas shopping online. So if you hear that a couple times, that's what that is. So we miss Jace. We miss him. When you lose a pet, it's hard. It's so hard. It's lonesome, and little things around the house. His toys, we still have some of them, and Marley will pack them around. She's not one to play with toys, but she'll pack them toys around just because she misses Jace. So we have our crab meat in there, and I'm just going to take about a half of a small onion, and I'm just going to chop that up and put that in there too. Now you can use green onions. It is prettier to use the green onions in there, but again, when I went to the store, they didn't look so good to me, so I didn't get them. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of hard to find groceries anymore that's not expensive, or they just don't look good. And I did go on Sunday night, so I guess, you know, the weekend produce and supplies had been picked over. I should have went earlier, I guess. That's what I get for being a slacker. Now I do like the mixed flavors of the onions and a dried onion. So I'm going to mix that together with a dried onion. So I'm going to do about a half of a very small onion chopped. And then I just get these little dried minced onions. They have a richer flavor to them. So I'm going to do that onion skin on there. A handful. I don't know how much that is. We're just going to put that in there because it does give it a little bit better flavor. And I'm going to use some fresh, well, as fresh as it gets in my house, garlic. It's just this jarred garlic. That's probably about a tablespoon. And again, I like the mixed flavors of a powder versus the fresh, because the powder gives it a little bit different flavor than the fresh does. So I'm going to use a garlic powder, probably about a teaspoon of that garlic powder. And I'm going to use onion powder. Probably about a teaspoon of that as well. And then we're going to do a sprinkling of salt. That's probably about 1/8 of a teaspoon of that. And then some black pepper. Now there is a difference in peppers. Some people will say there isn't. I say there is. I love this coarser black pepper. You can find it. It's a restaurant black pepper. It's coarser. To me, I just like it. It's prettier. So I'm just going to put some of that in there, about a tablespoon of that as well. And then we want to do a lemon. I'm just going to take my little zester and zest just a little bit of this lemon in there because it gives it just a little bit better flavor. And we're just going to zest that up in there. Just a little bit of that zest, not a whole lot. Probably about 1/8 of a teaspoon of that lemon zest. And then we're just going to juice this lemon in there. You can do this however you want. I just do it on my hand because I don't want to wash any more dishes. And I always put my hand under it to catch seeds. We're going to add a little bit of Miracle Whip. You can use Miracle Whip or mayonnaise. When I use Miracle Whip, I don't put sugar in it because the Miracle Whip tends to have a little sweetener in it. But if I'm going to use mayonnaise, and my favorite is Duke's, I will put a little bit of sugar in there because it kind of cuts that, I don't know, that flavor of mayonnaise. I don't know what it is. But a big spoonful of that, which is probably about 1/8 probably of a cup, or they don't have that in measurements, 1/4 of a cup or a little less, or a big spoonful. Guys, I don't measure hardly anything unless I go by a recipe. Something I make up on my own, and this is something I kind of made up on my own. I don't measure it. I just put it in there and I taste it as I go. You're going to use 1 brick of cream cheese, and if you get it at room temperature, it's going to do a whole lot better in mixing in here. If you don't get it to room temperature, there's always a trick that you can go by. I just pop it in the microwave for a little bit, and that's going to soften it just a little bit for you, and it's not a big deal. It does come out of the package better if it's a little colder than if it's warm. So we're going to plop that in there, and then we're going to take a little bit of cheese. You can use whatever cheese you want. I like to use a pepper jack cheese simply because I like that extra kick from that pepper. And I'm just going to use an entire packaged block of cheese. You can use it and grate it however you want. I just grate it on one of these really good sharp graters, and it goes pretty quick. Not as quick as if you use a power grater probably, but now I like these for little things like nutmeg. I like them for the cheeses. A hard cheese is really good for, and for lemon zest and things like that, I like them for that too. I love these little junk stores that sell, I call it a junk store. I don't know what they are. I don't know. Overstock stores. And they sell all these things dirt cheap. Well, I was at one of them one day and they had these 3 things in a box for $5. I thought I had won the freaking lottery because these things are expensive. And I thought it was the same one. I didn't know until I got it home that they came in different sizes. So this is a little finer one. This is one that's more like a slit. I don't really know what I'd use this for, but it's just freaking cool, isn't it? I think it'd be good for like big pieces of chocolate if you froze your chocolate and grated it and kind of give you like a little curl. And then this one as well. Now, this one takes longer because it's more narrow than if you used one like this. It's going to cover a lot more area, but I've wore the far out of this one, and it's not nearly as sharp. For cheese, it's okay, but for something hard like nutmeg, I don't do nutmeg powder. I don't do it. I buy my nutmeg whole and I grate it because it gives it a so much better flavor. You can freeze your cheeses a little bit in the freezer, and it makes them a little harder, and they will grate much, much easier for you. I didn't do that because, well, I forgot. And also, it makes it colder, and it will take a little bit longer to cook. If you were going to do this ahead of time, and by all means, do your stuff ahead of time. If you're gonna do this ahead of time, then you can do it like the day ahead of time, put it in your dish, and then get that dish ready to bake. Grease your pan, cover it with aluminum foil, throw it in the refrigerator. And then right before you're entertaining your guests, pull it out, let it set to room temperature for about 15-20 minutes, and then pop it in the oven. Anytime I'm gonna cook something like that I have got made ahead of time, if I put it together, I'm always gonna set it out on the counter for a good 30 minutes maybe, sometimes even longer, because it's gonna cook faster for you. Yeah, I know, the time it takes you to set it on the counter, but that cold temperature is also gonna drop that temperature in your oven. And we want to make sure that we get a very specific temperature when we're baking. When it gets down to these end pieces, I'm just gonna take and run my knife through it the best I can. And it's okay if you've got that big chunk of cheese in there, because when you bite into it, that big old chunk of ooey gooey cheese is good stuff. Okay, I think we've got everything in there. Guys, I want to tell you something else about that lemon. I forgot to tell you a while ago. If you have a lemon that's set in your refrigerator and they get kind of hard a little bit, you don't want to use that zest, but you can still use what's inside. So I will take a paper towel, really, really wet, and wrap it around that lemon and pop it in the microwave for about 10-15 seconds. That's really good to use for oranges, lemons, limes, anything you're gonna squeeze, because if it's warm, you'll get more juice out of it. So that's something to keep in mind. And sometimes if you'll put that paper towel around it and let it set after you heated it up for 20-30 minutes, you'll also put back some of that moisture in that zest of the peel, and you can actually use it. It just depends on how far it's gone. I've had a few of those that look pretty bad. One day I went to make something and I knew I had some limes in the refrigerator, and I thought, oh, I've got those, I'm not buying them at the store, and I get home and I get them out and they're brown. They look like little miniature avocado eggs, but I could not use the zest, but I could use the juice, so that was okay. So we're just gonna pop this in our mixer, and I like to use one of these scraper paddle type attachments because it's gonna scrape around the bowl. If I'm gonna use mayonnaise, I'll put a little sugar in there, but I used Miracle Whip today, so we didn't do that. And again, you can use any kind of cheese. Gruyere cheese is good, Munster cheese is good, a shredded packaged cheese is good. I just like to grate the cheese myself. Again, I'm a control freak, but I feel like it tastes better. You get more of a better flavor. And the bag cheeses tend to be a little drier. And it doesn't take long at all for this to mix up. I don't like to have all this mess on my counter, so I keep these little, it's like a delicatessen paper, and I keep it on the counter, and when I'm making stuff like this and I don't want my utensils laying on the counter, I'll just lay it on one of those sheets. I'm a little bit of a germ freak. My friends are like, you're constantly washing. Well, I can't help it. When I work at the beauty shop, that's, you know, we have to sanitize and clean everything, so I tend to bring that little trait home with me. We're just going to spray the inside of our pan that we're going to serve it in, a little bit of a cooking spray. And this is kind of what it looks like. It looks like it's thick and dry, but when that bakes, it's going to cause all those cheeses to melt. The cream cheese is going to melt more, that pepper jack cheese is going to melt more, and it's just good. You can put anything in here, water chestnuts, you can put in there. Artichoke hearts is really good too. I'll sometimes will do those, and I'll just kind of chop them up a little bit and put in there. We're just going to put this in our dish and smooth it around. Get all that off there. My hands are clean. Always go around your bowl, wipe it off, get all those edges, get all that off there, because when it bakes, it's going to be ugly. We don't want ugly. So that's what it looks like. You can put cheese on it if you want to, but I'm not going to because it has quite a bit of cheese in it. We're just going to pop this in the oven at 350 and bake it till it's ooey gooey and golden. You'll notice I put that in a Fiesta dish. Fiesta dishes, you can bake in them, you can freeze in them, you can serve in them, you can eat in them, you can microwave in them, you can dishwash them, you can do anything in them. That's one reason why I love them, because that is so good for things like that. So if you have Fiesta and you didn't know that, now you do. So our next item we're going to do is a cheeseburger slider. Kind of like a White Castle cheeseburger, but a little bit easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to put about a pound of ground beef in our bowl. We're going to do a fresh onion and a dried onion. And we're going to grate this onion like we did our cheeses. And this is the bigger one. By grating it, you're getting the onion flavor of the juice throughout your entire burger, and that's also going to help to make your meat a little juicier. If you do meatloaf and you don't want to chop up your onions, if you have one of them husbands or family members that don't like onion, it's seeing the onion that they don't like. Usually the flavor of the onion they do like. So a little cheat sheet is to grate it like this. I might do that with tomatoes every now and then. Don't worry, Todd Devine ain't gonna watch this, so he ain't gonna know. He hates tomatoes, hates them. But he loves ketchup, spaghetti, pizza, all those things made with tomatoes, but he cannot stand a tomato. So if he gets a cheeseburger out somewhere and they put a tomato on it, he ain't liking it. So we've got our onion in there. We're gonna go back to these dried onions again. I don't know how much that is, probably a couple of tablespoons. Black pepper, just a couple of shakes of that, depending on how much black pepper you like on your burgers. If you're like me and you missed the Calvert Drive-In, that pepper on those burgers was some good stuff, wasn't it? Y'all need to buy that and open it back up. That was my Sunday go-to. On Sundays, we'd come home from the lake and we'd just call in our order down at the drive-in because it's right down the road, and we'd pick up cheeseburgers from the drive-in. Well, it closed down, so I got to go to Plan B on Sunday night. So we're going to take a pan. We're going to spray it lightly with a cooking spray. And you'll notice I use parchment paper. Even though I'm going to use parchment paper, I always spray it because juices will get on there and it just makes that cleanup a little easier. So we've got our ground beef, we've got our grated onion, our dehydrated onion, salt and pepper. And then we're just going to stir all of that up together. And pick out these big pieces of onions. You can stir it up, but y'all know me. I'm putting that hand in there. It freaks some people out when you use your hands. If you wash your hands and you make sure your nails are good and clean underneath, it's okay to use your hands. That's what God gave them to us for, was to use. So we've got it good and mixed up. We're just gonna dump it on our plate there, and we're gonna pat it out. You can go about this 2 or 3 different ways. I do this way because it's easier and all about easy. Again, you can get this mixed up even the morning of your party, the day before, and then just pop it in the refrigerator. And if you're like me and you want to be a little bit anal about it, you want everything to be uniform, I'll show you a little trick. I'm going to take another one of these papers. You can use aluminum foil, saran wrap, whatever. Take your cutting board, put on top of it, mash down. And again, I'm a control freak, so it's all got to be square. All square, all uniform. And this doesn't look like a lot of meat, but once it cooks, you're gonna get enough for probably about 12 little sliders. Maybe more, maybe less. You can just roll your edges up like that and fold it and give you more of a cleaner, squared off edge. And we're ready to go in the oven. Back in the oven, in there with our other stuff we got going on 350 until it's good and done. Every good party deserves a dessert of some sort. And parties are all about finger food. So today, we are going to make 2 desserts, easy to make, and they are so, so good, and everything is just pretty much thrown together. So this stuff is puff pastry. If you've never used or worked with puff pastry, it comes in the freezer department, like where your frozen pie crusts and things are. And it's super, super easy to work with, and it's beautiful and it's fun. So today, we're gonna take our puff pastry. It just comes in a box and it's wrapped in paper like this. You're gonna wanna make sure it thaws out to room temperature before you work with it, because like a pie crust, it's gonna be hard to work with if it's cold. It's gonna cause it to crack. And it comes, and you just open it up like this into sheets. I'm gonna move this over to the side so we can work on it a little better. And we're just going to take it and put it on our little counter here. And we're just gonna lightly flour it with some flour. We're gonna take our rolling pin and roll it out just a little bit. You don't wanna roll it out a whole lot. You just more or less wanna make it more uniform, so that it's about the same. So we've got that one done. And to this, we're gonna use raspberry jam. Now you can use with seeds or seedless. I think the seeds are kind of a pain in the butt, but to me it just tastes better. It just tastes better. So we're gonna use, that's probably about 1/4 cup of the raspberry jam. And if you've watched my shows before, you know I make my own concoction of extracts. I buy Mexican vanilla, and then I put vanilla bean pods in there. And it just gives it a much, much better flavor. So I'm gonna add probably a teaspoon, or 1/2 teaspoon probably, because it's Mexican. It's a lot stronger. And then this is 1/3 cup. We're gonna do just a little less than that, probably about 1/2 of that cup of brown sugar. And the reason why we're going to do that is because when we cook this, that brown sugar, to me, I find it just makes it better. I don't know. And you'll see it kindly thins that down a little bit with the brown sugar and that little bit of vanilla. And we're just going to pour that on there. You may not have to use it all. You're just going to spread it around. And this is really a good thing to do also for Christmas morning, because this is going to be a little dessert that's just so good. We want to cover those edges all the way out. And when it bakes, it will bake out, but that's okay. And we have it good and covered. But in some areas it's not enough, so I'm just going to go ahead and put all that on there. Because it's thinner in some areas than others. We've got parchment paper on this one. That doesn't work very well. Get them sleeves up. We want to make sure that they're about the same, and you can see there that it is. And then we're just going to flop it over. And this is already greased because I had it in my pan, so I'm just going to say a little prayer that I don't dump it. There we go. And you can see that it's all about the same size. And here's where it gets fun. We want to allow about halfway through here for all that, and I'm just going to lightly mark it with my knife. I'm not really cutting it, I'm just marking it so I know about how far to go in. And that's probably about 2.5 to 3 inches on both sides. And we're going to make slits for lines here. We're going to go in about 1/2 inch, make each one of these cuts 1/2 inch. And it doesn't have to be perfect, really it doesn't. Because when we fold it over, it's not going to matter. And then once we get that done, we are just going to braid it over. You ever buy those things from the school, those butter braids? Well, this is actually kind of like a butter braid. You can do this with anything. You can do it with cream cheese and strawberries, butter and sugar and cinnamon, or butter, sugar, and cocoa powder. The raspberries like we're doing it today. You can do apples, anything. And as you see, some of it's oozing out. That's okay too. And we're just going to use our hands to shape it. Now to that, we're going to brush the top of it. I'm going to use a little bit of 1/2 and 1/2. You can use milk, you can use an egg. I just like the 1/2 and 1/2 because an egg, sometimes if you don't brush it right, it's going to get all on there and it gets a little nasty. So I'm just going to put a little bit of 1/2 and 1/2 in my bowl here. Just a little bit of sugar, a little bit. I mean, just a little bit. You want that to kindly brown the top. As you'll see, that's going to be probably about 1/4 teaspoon, and just a splash of our vanilla. And we're going to brush the top of that. Just brush the top of it. And where we've got that jelly on there, the jam, it's okay. We're just going to move it around. This is also something really good on snow days. Like the butter braids, you don't have to get this out of the freezer and let it rise overnight. This is just something that, as long as your puff pastry is thawed out and at room temperature, you're good to go. Just brush it lightly with that. Now, you can sprinkle some sugar on there if you want to, but I'm going to put a special topping on that when we're all done. So I'm not going to put sugar on it. So there's that. I'm going to take my towel here and clean up this a little bit here, because as that bakes, that may burn on the sides, and I don't want that smoking up my house. So just clean that up. Okay, and the 350-degree oven, and that's going to bake too for about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, our next dessert we're going to do is another dessert made with the puff pastry, but Not everybody likes raspberry. My husband is a big apple lover. So we're gonna do an apple dessert made into like little dumplings. So we're gonna use some of these just canned, seasoned, fried apples. And those are another go-to thing that I try to keep in my pantry because you can use these for baked apples. You can use them if you want to make an apple pie and you don't want to have to cut up your apples. You can use those. You can use them for a dessert like this. If you want to do like oatmeal and you want to put apples in there, you can do. These are relatively cheap. The puff pastry, those are about probably $6, $7 a box for your puff pastry, which is expensive when it comes to like packaged pie crusts and stuff, but it's so good, and it's just good. It's just good. So this is what your apples is gonna look like. Now, I will drain the juice off of these because I really don't want that extra juice in our dessert today because we're gonna use some butter. So just drain that off. You don't have a whole lot of juice in there, but you will have some. And I don't like the way that tastes, so I'm going to rinse it just a little bit. Anytime I do like canned vegetables, corn, green beans, pinto beans, white beans, anything like that, I always drain them and I rinse them because I don't like the thick coating that they have. So we're going to start with 1 can. I think 1 can's going to get us today with our dessert. So we're going to do 1 can of our apples. We're going to sprinkle it with about 1/3 cup of brown sugar. And again, I don't measure. Cinnamon, I do it just to the way I like the way it looks. So we're going to start with about 1/2 teaspoon. And a splash of our vanilla. And it's going to look a lot like that. See, there's still quite a bit of that juice in there just from coming off those apples. Because we are going to have a little bit of juice in there, we don't want a messy apple dumpling. So I'm going to add a little bit of cornstarch to this as my thickener. And this is just a throwaway plastic spoon. That's going to end up being about maybe a tablespoon of cornstarch in there. And we're just going to toss that around. So we're going to melt some butter in here, and while that's melting, we're going to get our puff pastry ready for our next dessert. We're going to do, again, like we did earlier, sprinkle a little bit of that down. Here's where this is going to be a little different than what we did earlier with our other one. We're still going to fold it out and roll it out. You don't have to do that, but I feel like it just makes it a little bit more uniform. So we've got our square here. And we're going to do these kind of like, we're going to cut this in half long ways, like this. And then we're going to cut it in half again like this, about half. Some of them are going to be bigger. If you wanted to be more particular with it, you can measure. I'm not going to, because that would just make sense. Okay, so we've got 4. We're going to end up with 8 dumplings. So I've got my pan here. We're going to get it ready. Again, I've greased it with a little bit of cooking spray and put my parchment paper down. So we've got our butter here melted. That was probably about 3/4 of a stick. We're not going to use it all. But we want some butter in there, so I'm going to put 2 of these big spoons of that in there and stir that up. I'm going to share with you guys another little trick. I love the taste of butter in any of my baked goods. So I buy this, it's imitation, it's a butter flavored extract. Anything I bake, cakes, breads, cookies, whatever, I always add a little splash of that into it, just because it makes it taste more like butter. So you see what we got here. It's just ooey gooey. We're going to take a spoon of that and put it in our apple, our little puff pastry there. We probably will end up, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and add this to it because I can tell that we're not going to have enough. Now with this one, because I've already got all this stuff in there, I'm just going to drain it in a colander and dump it in there. So I've just dumped that can, rinsed it off, and drained it really good. And that's going to give us more of what we needed. So we've got that ready to go. We're going to put just a little bit more apple in there. Trying not to get a whole lot of the juice because it's going to ooze out. And this little mixture that we had earlier, we're going to use that as our glue. So don't throw anything away. It can be salvaged and used. Then we're just going to take it from corner to corner like that. And it's going to run out. That's okay, girls. It's all right. You may have to work that stuff back up in there, but that's all right too. You can use a fork, you can use your fingers, whatever you want to do. I just use my fingers and just mash it in there. I don't usually do a fork, especially with puff pastry, because it just makes it look more like a fried pie. Now these you can do ahead of time and get them just like we are now and pop them in the refrigerator and let them sit. Cover them really good with some plastic wrap. See how that's just kindly sealed all in there? That's going to hold all of that in there. And you can brush it beforehand if you want to keep from getting all that goop all over into your milk mixture. Again, we're just going to go corner to corner. And you know how we did that, the raspberry with the puff pastry earlier? If you want something like that and you don't want to go to the trouble with your apples, I'll tell you something else you can do is chunky applesauce. Put that in there with a little bit of brown sugar and cinnamon, and you can do apple without having to do all your apples. There's a lot of ways to cheat, people. Oh, look at there. It's coming out the bottom. You can brush this on or you can use your finger. And usually I just do my finger because, again, it's faster. And I'm all about the speed. Make sure you get these edges sealed up the best you can. That's going to hold all that good stuff in there. I'm going to show you guys what this looks like now. Here is our sliders. And these are done and ready to come out of the oven. We're just going to take them out. And this is our crab dip. It's nice and golden and it's ready to come out. I'm just going to move our dessert down to the bottom. You can bake on the top and the bottom racks of your oven. You just want to make sure and rotate those as well. You have to be really, really good about rotating them or it's going to cook faster on the top versus the bottom. I'm going to show you guys something. I've had this little squirrel for probably 25 years. This is a squirrel made out of pine wood. Randy Green at the wood shop, he used to own Pine Wood Primitives, and they made this little thing. It's an oven rack thing, and you just pull your oven rack out with it and push your oven rack back in. This thing's old, but I love it. He sits right up there. Okay, so we've got our puff pastry desserts ready to go. We're going to still use this milk, and we're going to brush the tops of them just like we did before. We're going to use the milk product instead of butter because milk's going to aid in the browning factor of it, and it's going to give it a shinier top versus the butter is not going to do that. And we do have the butter inside already. And you'll see when we get these baked that it's just going to make it so much shinier and prettier. Egg will also do the same thing and give it a shinier look. But then again, like I said earlier, if you get that egg on, see how this is pooling up at the bottom? If you put an egg on there, then you're going to have chunks of egg. And this bakes off. Where the egg, it's got more protein in it, so it's going to stay solid. And you're going to have a little bit of cooked egg on there. You can drizzle it with butter on the top if you want. And if you'll see, I do have my extra butter here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save that aside for the glaze we're going to make. And these are not pretty by no means, but I think that's kind of what makes it homemade looking. If we took the time and see, like right here it's coming out, then you can just use your little brush and kind of poke that edge down just a little bit and seal it up a little bit better. It's probably going to end up cooking out, but that's okay too. If it was perfectly looking, then people would say that you bought it at a store. I don't know if I've ever told you about my mother. My mom died a couple years ago. She had cancer, but she loved to cook. My grandmother loved to cook, and I think that's where I got my love to cook, was from them. But when Mom started getting sick, she didn't feel like doing a lot of cooking. So she was telling me one time that she had an event coming up at her church that she needed to make a cake. And she said, I just don't feel like it. And I said, Mom, don't worry, I'll do it for you. So I rushed home from work. It was on a Wednesday. Rushed home from the beauty shop, whipped her up a cake. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. No, actually, I think it was on a Tuesday. She needed it for Wednesday night. Whipped that cake up, got it ready to go, and I took it to her on Wednesday morning. And I took it in a cake box, a cardboard box. And she looked at it and she said, what'd you do? Buy that? And I said, no, Mother, I didn't. I made it. Well, when she took it to church that night and they served it for their meal, everybody went on and on about this cake. Oh, that's so pretty. It's so pretty. And she told my nephew Bryson, she said, that my family calls me Monk. She said, I know Monk. She went somewhere and bought that cake. She probably went somewhere and bought it. That's a bought cake. That's not a made cake, because it's just pretty. And she didn't do that. So that's kind of been a running joke in my family for years, that when I make something, they'll say, I know you bought that cake. So that's just a little special memory. At first it hurt my feelings, but now that my mom's gone, I look back at it and I laugh, because if you knew Diane, that's typical. This is another hidden gem. This is pure grain sugar. It is just pure grain, and again, I keep my vanilla seed pods in there. That's just a little trick. If I make sugar cookies, I always put this sugar on there instead of regular sugar. It's darker in color, not like brown sugar. It's just cane sugar, and it's got a good consistency to it. It's a bigger granular, and then this vanilla pods flavors it, and it makes it taste really, really good. So I just put my spoon in there and get me some out. You'll see there's chunks because that moisture of that vanilla bean, it gets on there and it chunks it up. So I'm just going to put some of that in my hand and then just lightly sprinkle that on top. Again, this will also make it brown a little bit, but I love the texture of that crunchiness of that sugar on there. And a little of this goes a long way. Sugar cookies, oh, they're so good. And my son Travis, he loves snickerdoodle cookies. So when I make them, I always use this sugar. And I put me a little bit of cinnamon and that grated nutmeg, because like I said before, a freshly grated nutmeg is so much better than that powdered nutmeg. You can get this at a grocery store. Walmart sometimes will carry it. Some smaller grocery stores may or may not, but you can just find it just about anywhere. I do know Walmart has it, and I think that's where I got this one at. Now this is our raspberry dessert. Isn't that pretty? You can shape this like a Christmas tree if you want. I didn't do that because it's a little bit more time consuming. And we're just gonna pop this one in. And you'll see my pan in there. I use a pan of water when I bake my cakes and my breads. I'm not going to on this because I want it to crust a little bit. But I usually keep an old pie pan in there, and then or a cake pan that I don't use, and I'll fill it up with water when I'm baking like biscuits, breads, cakes, anything like that that I want to stay moist. I'll keep that full there. So, okay, we're gonna let this cool just a little bit, and while we're doing that, we're gonna go ahead and get our other stuff ready for our cheeseburgers here. So we've got our slider meat out of the oven. We're gonna cut this hamburger meat to fit our buns. Because it's already cooked, it's not gonna shrink up. So we can pretty much cut each one to be the size of our bun. So we're just gonna cheat a little bit. I'm just gonna take one of these buns and set it on top, and that's gonna give us probably about 6. So we're gonna cut it just under, right down the middle. Actually, we can probably get just a few more out of it. And that's okay that some of these aren't gonna be exactly the same. That's okay. We can patch it and nobody will ever know. That's gonna be just shy of it, and this one we're gonna do the same. These scrap pieces, we're gonna use those still. So what we're gonna do is we're going to slice it, and we're gonna put some cheese on there. And you can use any kind of cheese. I'm just gonna use a sliced American cheese, because y'all know I'm a tightwad. I buy it in bulk. So I go to this little grocery store, a little Amish grocery store, and it's sliced, and I just bring it home and work with it that way. We're gonna take our bun, we're gonna take one of our little patties and put it on there. See, it covers just about the entire thing. And it doesn't matter if the cheese is perfect. Just break it up and put it on there the best you can. And the more cheese you have, the better it is. I'm gonna use about 1 piece of cheese per slider. Take it and we're gonna put it together just like that. So we have our perfect little slider, and we're just gonna pop that on there. I forgot to tell you about our buns. I just use, it's like a sweet Hawaiian slider bun, and they're just little bitty buns. These are great for these little cheeseburgers. For those ham sliders, they're good for those. And I like to use these for like chicken salad. If we're gonna do a shower or something like that, I like to put our chicken salad on these little things because these are perfect little sides. Some of them are gonna be smaller, some of them are gonna be bigger. This one is a little thicker, so I'm okay if it's a little bit smaller. And they ain't gonna care. All they're gonna wanna do is eat it. My cheese got smashed. Here we go. And I'll tell you something else these are really good for, because it's already pre-done. Really, you've already cooked your hamburger meat. It's all pre-cooked. What I will do with these two is my husband, he takes his lunch now to work for the first time in probably 30-something years. He's taking his lunch to work. These are really good. You can take them like this, and these little sheets of paper. You can just take one of these sheets, take your sandwich, wrap it up real good and tight, and put it in a Ziploc bag. And then when he gets to work, he can just take this out of the plastic Ziploc bag, just like this, pop it in the microwave for 10-15 seconds, and he's got a fresh hot sandwich. It's one of those meal prep things that it's not fun doing it, but sometimes it makes our life a little easier. And trust me, this is better for him than, say, a drive-through cheeseburger, and it tastes better. So a little bit of work goes a long way. These little scrap pieces, we're not going to throw those away. We're going to use them. We're just going to make a little makeshift burger, and nobody will know. Now you can put a pickle on here, just like a little White Castle cheeseburger. We really don't like the pickles on there because it makes your bread soggy. And if we wanted a pickle, we'd just end up putting it on there. But we don't do that. So you can do that if you want to. You can use any kind of cheese that you want. You can use a hot pepper sliced cheese, a white American cheese. I'm just using a regular American. And again, see, nobody will know. I think we got enough for one more. So that's going to give us about 9 sandwiches. And that's about a pound of ground beef. And I'll tell you something else you can do. If you don't want to use a bun, you can use anything. You can use crescent rolls. Canned biscuits are really good. You can get those rolled out, refrigerated pizza crust if you choose to do so. Anything. You don't have to use a bun. Step outside the box. Just do it. If you go to the store and they don't have these, don't give up. You can use something else. You can improvise. You can use, like I said, the crescent rolls are always a good thing to use. And now they make them in a sheet, so that's great. The refrigerated pizza crust, I keep those on hand. Sometimes I make them from scratch, but I try to keep those on hand because they're really good for little sandwiches like this or like a little pizza pocket. You can just throw that in the oven. If I work late and I don't really want drive-through food, I can just come home, get that out, put some sauce on it, some cheese, some pepperoni, some ham, whatever. Put it in there and pop it in the pizza oven, and you have a good little pocket ready to go. And I'll tell you what we are going to do. We're going to take some of this butter we had earlier, and I'm just going to use the back of my spoon and just kind of brush that on there. You don't have to do this, but it does make it good. And it doesn't take much, just a little bit. And we're just going to lightly dust it with a little bit of this garlic powder. Some of them may be more than others. You can use your finger and rub it around because I've washed my hands a million times. Just so that you don't have all that dry powder all over everything. If you have a brush, you can use that. That's probably a wiser choice than to use your finger, but I've washed my hands a million times. And then we're just going to fold this up over it, just like that, and just like that. And pop it in that 350-degree oven for about probably 10 to 15 minutes. For our next little venture, we're gonna do some chicken tenders. And we're just gonna I bought them at the store, little bitty package tenders in a package like this. It's just little, I think it says chicken tenderloins. They're already cut, they're already done. All you gotta do is just bread them and go. So we're gonna take a little bit of buttermilk. We're gonna pop our chicken in our bowl there. And they're kind of big, but that's okay. If you don't want them as big, you can go in there and cut them smaller, but hey, it's a party. We're just gonna pop those chicken tenders in there. A little bit of buttermilk. Now this you can do ahead of time. I like to do that ahead of time if I can, because the buttermilk will kindly tenderize that chicken a little bit. Sprinkle a little bit of salt in there, because this is a good way to take advantage of your time and flavor that up just a little bit. A little bit of salt and just a little bit of onion powder, not a lot, just a little bit. And some black pepper. Get the right side. If you're ever in doubt, put it in your hand first. I've been known to do that and then both of them be open. Just a little bit of that black pepper in there. And just kind of like toss that around. You don't need a whole bunch of milk in there. Just toss that around. Get it good and coated. You don't need a lot of milk, just enough to kindly cover it. And if you were going to marinate this and let it set, this is when you would cover it with the plastic wrap and then pop it in the fridge. I'm going to go ahead and put our oil on to get hot, because it'll take just a little bit to get hot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quickly. All right, we're going to check on our little turnovers while we're back here. Yep, and they are perfect and ready to come out of the oven. See, they were ugly at first, but see how pretty they are? All those little imperfections bakes out, so that's good. We're gonna set this back here and let it cool for a little bit. We've got our oil on heating for our chicken tenders and the other things that we're gonna do. So we're gonna keep that good and hot. So for our chicken tenders, we're gonna put us a little bit of plain flour in here. That's about a cup. Again, you don't need a whole lot. We're going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of that onion powder, just a little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of that black pepper. We're also going to add a little bit of white pepper. White pepper is a milder pepper and it just gives it a really good flavor. And then this is just a little mixture of stuff that I use. It's called the blend. It's just a mixture of spices, a little bit of that. And this is what I keep mixed up. This is my French fry seasoning. I just make my own different spices. And anytime I fry anything, I add just a little bit of that in there to it. It's got crushed red pepper. It's got a little bit of cumin, a little bit of turmeric, a little bit of paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, just a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll use a little bit of powdered dry ranch dressing mix. And because I want it to have a little extra color to it, I'm just going to add just a pinch of paprika. And that's what it looks like, and we're just going to stir it all up. This is a good go-to fry, anything that you use for chicken, pork chops, whatever. Sometimes I'll just mix a whole big box of this up and keep it in the pantry, but I've used all of it and I don't have any of it mixed up. And then when I get ready to fry something, I just pull it out and fry it and I'm ready to go. A lot of y'all say, oh, she's using them things all the time. She could be wiping that counter down, but it just keeps all the germs and the cross-contamination down the best that we can. So we're going to take our chicken tenders, and we've got our breading mixture here, and we're going to do left and right hands. One hand's for wet, one hand's for dry. If you do it this way, you're not going to have a mess. So we're going to take our chicken tender and drip off the best we can and put that in there. and toss it around. And I'm gonna do 2 or 3 of these and let them kind of set, so that keeps that breading on there. And you'll notice I put this on like a little cookie sheet type thing, is because that's gonna help to dry that out, and when we go to fry this, it's gonna fry a lot better if that's had time to kind of air dry a little bit. And that's what it's gonna look like when it comes out. We're going to do several things today like this, so we're going to use this thing repeatedly. And it is still a long time, you know, in the day before we're going to be having people over. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and cook these so I can show you guys how to do it. And I'm going to get them cooked, and then I'm going to, once I get them cooked, I'm going to pop them in the refrigerator if it's going to be several hours, or I will keep them in the oven because it's not going to be that long. Keep it on warm so it doesn't get below the temperature it needs to. And then right before our friends come over, I'm going to put these in the air fryer just for a little bit to crisp them back up. If you don't have an air fryer, girl, go get you one. It makes life so much easier. Anything you have left over is so much better warmed up in the air fryer. And it makes things like this a lot easier because you can pre-cook it and then pop it in the air fryer, and it takes some of that time off. And you'll notice as you're doing this, you're going to see bigger chunks of those crunchies come up there. Don't sift through it. Get that on there because that's also going to make it a little bit crunchier for you. Okay, so we've got that. We're going to let that dry, and I'm going to wash my hands again. Now to our milk mixture, I'm going to add some more of that buttermilk in there. And I'm going to add, because we're going to do our onions now, I'm going to use, it's a Southwest Chipotle into the buttermilk. And then we're going to go with our basic mixture there for our fry. And again, you'll see there's not a whole lot in there, but you don't really need a lot. Now, if you were going to do your onions like a blooming onion, like you might get in a restaurant, then you would go in there and cut them differently. But because we're going to have a few people, I don't want them to have to cut into that onion, so we're going to do it in wedges. And it makes it easier to cook. We're going to cut our onion in half, and then we're just going to eyeball it and just do little wedges like you would wedges of a lemon. And yes, they're going to fall apart, but that's okay. You're not really going to encourage it to fall apart. They're just going to fall apart all on their own. Just going to toss it around. And some of them that have stayed whole, if you wanted to make them smaller, just pull them in half. So they're all kind of about the same. Again, left, right. And we're going to pick these up one at a time. Some of them will be bigger, some of them will be smaller. If you like onions, you're gonna want the big ones. If you don't really care for them so well, you're gonna want these little bitty loosies. And to make it, when you get to the very bottom where you got those little loosies, as I call them, just shake your hand a little bit and they'll fall out. When you pick them up, put them in there. Okay, so that's got our onions all ready to go. We're gonna let those dry and we're gonna get our pickles ready. Now to our flour mixture there that we had earlier, we kind of used a lot of it. So I've got a lot of flavor in there and we don't need as much with our pickles. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of plain flour to that and stir that around. And again, like we said earlier, there's gonna be chunks of that crunchy on there. I'm just gonna work that up kind of like you would if you're making a pie crust. You wanna get them down smaller because that's gonna pack a lot of flavor for the coating on our dill pickles. To that, we're gonna add a little bit of, it's just a panko breadcrumb. This is not like a regular breadcrumb. It's just a bigger type bread that they use. You'll find this in a lot of fried foods that you get in a restaurant, and some Asian cuisines, they will use a panko. We're gonna add probably about 3/4 of a cup to that. And we're just gonna stir that around. This is a good go-to recipe for if you're gonna do fried green beans or whatever. This is just really good. And we just see how that is all tossed in there. I think we can also do some cheese sticks, so we're gonna do that in there as well. We aren't gonna do very many of those. I'm just gonna really show you what it looks like when you do the cheese sticks. I think we'll just do 3 of those, just so you can kind of get an idea. And I'm gonna do those before we do our pickles because that pickle juice, I don't want it to flavor our cheese sticks. So we've just took 3 already. It's like a little mozzarella cheese stick that you get packaged for your kids' lunch. We're gonna do 3 of them, but we're gonna cut them in half. And this is what it looks like. We're just gonna toss those in our buttermilk recipe there. And I like to just, if you'll see, I'm just kind of shaking my hand around. What that's doing is just getting all that on there, and when I get it all done, I'm just gonna form it like in a little log with my hand. That's just gonna make that stick a little bit better. You can do these on cheese cubes, but I find that the sticks are easier to work with and you don't have as much in there making a mess. So there's that. So if our pickles, we are going to take our pickles out, and I like to get just a cheap brand. I like to get the zesty dill pickles because they have more flavor in them. And again, this is really just to kindly show you what it looks like, so I'm just going to do a few here. And I'm going to cut, because that's a big one. I'm just going to cut them in half. So you got like a little finger. You can do the dill pickle slices, or you can do these. I think for a bunch of people coming over, these are just prettier. So we're gonna put these in our milk mixture. Toss it around. And this is not something you would need to marinate like you would your chicken, because it's not really gonna take up any flavor. You can do this with shrimp. You can do this with like broccoli florets or cauliflower florets, anything like that that you might want to do. The panko just gives it that little extra crunch. And I'll kind of pat these on there, making it stick a little better. Now at this point, after you get these breaded, if you wanted to, you could pop this in the freezer and freeze it. This is another one of those things you can do it 2 or 3 days ahead of time. And I have even breaded these in a Ziploc bag before, because you can see like right here how it just kind of fell off. And just put them in the Ziploc bag with the breading that's left over and just throw that bag in the freezer because it'll stick better. It's at least got surface touching it that way. Okay, so there's that. I'm gonna clean up some of this mess and then we're gonna get ready to go back to the fryer. So we've checked the temperature of our oil and it is up to temperature at about 375. Actually, it's a little higher than that, but that's okay because it will cool down. We're just gonna pick one up and put it in to fry. You don't wanna put too many in here at one time because you don't wanna crowd your pan. I like to go at about 3. Probably could do 4. You just want to make sure that they don't stick together, but you want to be very gentle with it because you don't want to pull your breading off. They usually cook up pretty quick. That's a good thing about something like this is that because it's already, we bought it and it's packaged smaller and it's already cut down, it's kind of like it's portion controlled, so they're all going to be about the same size. So you know that they will cook all in about the same amount of time. Probably cooking in about 5 to 7 minutes really for them to cook, not long at all. You're going to want to keep a check on your temperature and make sure that that oil stays at about 375 degrees. I turned it down because it was hotter than that, and I can see the temperature's dropped a little bit. Now it's reading about 350, so I've turned it back up. I'm not going to touch that because it burns your hand. We're going to take them out and put them back on our sheet pan here to drain. And that one's going to take a little longer because it's a little bit bigger, but that's okay. When you first put them in, you're going to see that it bubbles up more. It's got all that moisture it's coming out, so it's kind of hard to see where it's at, so that's why I switched back to the tongs, so I can just put them in there and see where they're at and just gently move them off that bottom. By letting them dry a little bit before we fried them, as you'll see here, none of our breading come off, so that's a good little trick to know. As you're cooking them, you just want to move them around just gently, just so they don't get on that bottom a little bit. Tell you what I'm going to do too, while these are cooking and we still have a little bit here, those cheese curds are going to fry a little bit better if they're going to fry a little bit better if they're frozen a little bit. So I'm going to pop this in the freezer for just a few minutes while we finish this up. Anytime you're frying, you want to make sure and keep your grease clean. That's going to keep it from burning up and making everything taste bad. Okay. So we've got our chicken tenders done. We're going to move on to our others. We're going to do our cheese sticks first because they tend to, when they get warm, they fall apart. Again, remember not to overcrowd. And since we just did the 3 sticks cut in half, we're going to have 6. So we can do those all at one time. And pray they don't fall apart. As you can see, some of it's kind of cooking out, and we're going to need to make sure we keep that cleaned out. Before they cool down, we're going to separate them, because once they cool down, they'll stick together, like this one, and it'll just be a mess. There we go. Again, we're going to clean all that debris out of there. Make sure you rub your little strainer up against the sides of your pan, because everything likes to gravitate there. And get all that off. See, that's quite a bit. Okay, now we're going to move on to our dill pickles. Now actually we're going to do our onions, because those dill pickles sometimes will cause a little mess as well. If you're going to do these as an onion blossom, I would definitely put that onion back in the freezer after you breaded it and get it frozen, because that's going to help it to fry a little bit better. This makes me think of Tater Day. Now all we need is some deep fried Twinkies and we'll be all right. And a funnel cake. And these usually fry up pretty quickly too. These will float to the top just like a hush puppy or a piece of fish, and that's going to tell you when they're done and ready to get out. We actually like these done like onion rings instead of buying frozen packaged onion rings. We like them really well, but it's kind of time consuming. We only have those on special days at our house. And these two, like I said, if we cook them today and we have leftovers, then tomorrow you can just throw them in your air fryer, warm them up, and they're good to go. Anything that you can buy for, like at a fast food restaurant, if you get it home and your french fries have gotten cold, throw them in the air fryer. It only takes about a minute to crisp them back up. And that minute is worth it. That was hot. Okay. So now we're going to do our pickles. You know how everybody's doing like little charcuterie boards? This is really fun to put it on a board like you would a charcuterie board. And then like by your chicken tenders, you could put little trays, like little bowls of honey mustard or ranch. By your cheese sticks, you can put like a little cup with marinara sauce. By your onions, we're gonna mix up a little dip for the onions here in just a little bit. That would be cool to set in there. You know what? It's endless. It really is endless. You can do like a little charcuterie board for butters. I've been seeing that is really a big thing right now, to do like a cutting board and then put room temperature butter, spread it all out on there and do some different like herbs and stuff in it, like thyme or, you know, garlic, You can even do a sweet butter with cinnamon, sugar, and sprinkle that on top over to the side. And then you give your guests like a piece of homemade like bread, and then they just rub it in there and eat it. Again, I'm a germaphobe, so when I think about things like that, I think of everybody double dipping, so that kind of wigs me out a little bit. But I do kind of like the idea. So there we go. We have everything fried up and ready to serve. For our crab dip that we're gonna do it on these little pieces of bread. And I just buy whatever kind of bread. Today I'm using the Cheesecake Factory. It's a brown bread I bought at Kroger's. And I'm going to make it pretty and cut it kind of on the bias or at an angle. That's gonna make it look elongated. It's a fancy word. You can do these as thick or as thin as you like. I find this piece, nobody ever wants it. So that's when I use those for sampling before I cook it. So I can make sure everything tastes the way I want it to. So we're just gonna lay our baguettes down. You're gonna wanna put the biggest side down when we gotta toast them up. And we're gonna use a little bit of that butter that we had earlier. We just wanna put a little bit of butter on there, just kind of help crunch it up a little bit. And you can brush this on or you can do it with a spoon. Either way, it's kind of the same. Okay. We're gonna pop these in the oven and toast them up till they're just a little bit brown. While that's going, we're gonna work on our toppings for our desserts. The first one we're gonna work on is our raspberry. And we're gonna cheat a little bit. You can do melted chocolate chips with a little bit of whipping cream, but we're gonna cheat and we're gonna use this Nutella because it is so good. We're just gonna take a spoon of this Nutella, pop it in a little glass dish. We're gonna warm it in the microwave, just so it melts. It doesn't take but just a little bit. I had that microwave on 30 seconds, and I was just a little bit shy of that. We just wanna liquefy it just a little bit. And when we don't use all this, we can put it right back in that container because we really haven't changed anything about the Nutella other than we heated it just enough to thin it down. We're going to put the Nutella in our piping bag, squeeze it down to the very end, and we're just going to snip just a little bit of that end off and drizzle it across the top. I like to do it in just different patterns. Opposite of the way our weaves go. We've gone that way, and now we're going to go back this way. And then once we get that done, I'm just gonna go lightly across the top, back and forth. And there you have it. And again, we're gonna take what's left, we're gonna push it right down into there, snip more of our tip off so we can put it right back in our container. Nothing goes wasted. And there's our little dessert. One of them. We're gonna work on that apple dessert next. Now for our next dessert, which will be our apple turnovers, we're gonna take that melted butter that we had left over. We're gonna add just a little bit of half and half to it. And some powdered sugar. We're gonna add just enough so that it is a squeezable consistency. This sometimes takes a lot more powdered sugar than you think. And this is basically the same recipe I use for homemade cinnamon rolls, but I make it in a much bigger amount, so I'll put it in the mixer instead of doing it by hand. Okay. We're going to add a splash of vanilla. Even though we do have that butter already in there, just to accent that taste of the butter, we're gonna add just a little bit of butter extract and a pinch of salt, because that pinch of salt is gonna cut that harshness of the powdered sugar. And we have cooled down our turnovers just enough so that they're still just a little warm. And that's going to help to give our drizzle when we put on there. If it's too hot, it's going to melt that. And it's not going to be as pretty. And just put your piping bag over your hand and then spoon it in. And by doing this, you can use your hand to kind of clean that spoon off a little bit. Cut the tip just a smidge bigger than we did on the other and drizzle it across the top. My husband, the guys he works with, he's always telling them, oh, my wife makes this, my wife makes that. So he's just recently started a new job, and after he'd been there a week or so, I made cookies or something and sent to him. So now it's kind of a joke because he's still on probation, and he said one of the guys at work told him the other day, oh, I think you got this job made. Don't matter what you do, you got it made simply because your wife sends us treats. You know, it's just therapy to me. It feels good to get in the kitchen and make something, and sometimes I'll tinker around with a new recipe and they don't know it, but they're my guinea pigs. All right, so there we go. Our apple turnovers, they're ready to go. So now we're gonna work on our dip for our onion petals that we have. I'm just gonna stick my whisk in and grab me a little bit of sour cream. Whatever it grabs, that's what we're gonna go with. That's probably about 1/4 of a cup. We're going to do about the same amount of Miracle Whip. About 1/4 of a cup. We're going to cheat and use some of the flavors from ranch dressing. This is just a ranch dressing that I made up the other day. I'm just going to use a little bit of that. That makes it a little thinner and a little bit more dippable. We're just going to mix these together in our little bowl here. Probably could have got a bigger bowl. Now to that, we're going to add a little bit of that Mrs. Dash like we used earlier. That's going to be about a tablespoon that we got in that. We're just going to plop that in there. We're going to do, I'll measure it in my hand for you, of my fry mix. That's about a teaspoon of that in there. Now this you're going to want to do ahead of time so that can kindly rehydrate some of those flavors. And if you want to see a little bit more color to it, you can add ketchup or chili sauce or even some paprika. And I am going to add just a little bit of sugar to that to kindly cut that a little bit. Probably going to put in there about a teaspoon of sugar. And I'm kind of wanting to see a little bit more color to it. So I'm going to take some of that paprika and add a generous pinch to that as well. When you go to the restaurants and you eat those dips that come with the onions, it's got more of a color to it than what ours had. So that's why the paprika gives you a little color. Oh, that goodness. Okay. Now we're going to go get our bread out of the oven for our crab dip. So for our crab dip that we had earlier, we're just going to spoon a little bit of it out onto our toasted bread. And you can pop this back in the oven and toast it up a little more if you want to, or you can just leave it like this. I don't, because I feel like it kind of dries it out a little bit. Here's our little cheeseburger sliders. They're nice and warm. We're going to pop a couple of those on there. We're going to put this dip that we mixed up a little bit ago over by our dill pickles that we fried and beside some of our onion petals that we've made. And I would do a marinara, but I don't have any of that today. This was kind of an afterthought for you. And like I said, I would do the chicken tenders as well with a little bit of a honey mustard. But this kind of gives you an idea. Of course, not one person's going to eat that. That's a shareable tray. So for our raspberry dessert, we're just going to cut it in slices. And if you wanted to cut these in half, you could. I think we'll do that because these can be quite big. We're just going to pop this on a pretty little tray that we can pass around. Apple turnovers, you can use those whole like this and eat them as they are, or like for today, we are going to have some friends over, so we're going to cut these into pieces as well. So we're just going to take one of them and cut it into triangles, so like a little miniature handheld pie. And you just use your visual, however you want to do it, so they all kind of look the same. Trying to keep them all like a little handheld pie. So there we have it. We have our dessert tray. Now, if you wanted to, you could put like an appetizer toothpick in there or whatever, so that your guests could just pick them up and eat them. So here you go. We're going to enjoy this. We're going to celebrate and do it right. Oh my gosh, guys, I about forgot our cocktail. Okay guys, we have our cocktail, we have our dessert, and we have our appetizer plates here. Cheeseburger sliders, crab dip on a brown baguette bread, our fried dill pickles, we have our onion petal wedges, our cheese sticks, and our chicken tenders, and our homemade little sauce that we made. It has been really fun getting together with you guys today. It's been a great treat to be able to prepare this food and show you some secrets and get ready for our friends to come over. So here's to New Year's, here's to whatever day you want to celebrate. Cheers. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next year. Toodaloo.